The finale of World of Windrunners 12.0 has finally dropped. Do you know what? It was all going so well. Not for us. For Xal'atath. She dominated her way to the top, subverted mortals, devoured void lords, and tortured Illyria at the pinnacle of the Void Spire, where she tore a Naru from Illyria using the Black Blade and locked all of her plan into place, because she then used the energy of that Naru to corrupt the Sunwell, leading to the March on Quel'danas. It really did look like we had but a fool's hope. But we cut our way through, we fought the big fight, and then, at the peak of her glory, Xal'atath just walked away. Why did she walk away? Well, the answer is one word: Sylvanas. The most spicy of the Windrunner sisters is back, and she is back with a warning. And if that sounds familiar, you may be flashing back to another raid cinematic, Sepulchre of the First Ones. But this isn't Jailer-style bait. It's actually a direct reference to the finale of the World of Soul saga. It's one that Blizzard set up in patch 11.2.7. And you see, in The Last Titan, we are going to face down the Titan conspiracy that stretches back, canonically, to the beginning of time, and for the sake of our player characters, back to, let's just say to make it easy, Wrath of the Lich King-ish days and a bit of vanilla background. And at BlizzCon, Chris Metzen told us we'd be unraveling this Titan conspiracy, and with Sylvanas pulling the trigger on that storyline, it is time to ask, what the hell just happened? I just recapped it at lightning speed, but seriously, Xal'atath was kinda winning. It seemed like she had us. But then, of course, all of this happened.
You Windrunners. You just don't know when to lay down and die. We Windrunners are just stubborn that way. You? I honestly didn't factor for you. Death comes for all, Xal'atath. Even your wretched kind. We'll finish this another time, perhaps.
That was Sylvanas, disgraced war chief of the Horde, stepping out of the Shadowlands to snipe one of Xal'atath's shoulder shinies. Yes, we did all see the same thing. So, if you're wondering what's going on, or maybe your mind is exploding with possibilities, here is what you need to know and understand. Midnight pretty much just entered the World Soul saga. That might sound strange, but think about it. Since the beginning of this expansion, we've been asking how Quel'danas, how the Sunwell fits into this big World Soul saga arc. Well, as it turns out, Sylvanas pretty much just told us how, and the whole thing starts with this line from Chris Metzen.
And there, at Ulduar, you will bear witness to the return of the Titans to Azeroth. And there, you will uncover a vast conspiracy, one that stretches throughout the history of the world, one that will challenge everything you think you know about the Titans, their intentions, and the true nature of Azeroth itself.
It began with the War Within, and it ends with a fight against the Titans in Northrend. But honestly, it actually began long ago. I'd say the one moment that really is clear is when we discovered Algalon the Observer in Ulduar. That's when it became clear the Titans were not necessarily our friends, and then later on in the War Within, we kinda learned that a lot of that Titan machinery is sort of brainwashing Azeroth a little bit. Fun stuff, and a conspiracy that has so fundamentally controlled the cosmos that we're now discovering it extends even to the Shadowlands, and that our theories about the afterlife being too ordered were in fact true. And it seems that somehow the Titans are the ones responsible for a bunch of Shadowlands stuff. Which in a way shouldn't be surprising. Just look at the Shadowlands. A lot of it, even in its art style, does look kind of Titanic. It also explains why the Shadowlands almost felt like a power plant fueled by souls. You know, why mortal souls, our anima, were used to power these weird, neatly built realms of the dead. It felt a bit strange. We saw the anima flooding into Oribos and that it was going somewhere, but now it seems that it was kind of just channeling into the Titans' designs. And it's funny, because for such a short cinematic, Blizzard dropped an insane amount of lore. So to get a handle on it, we need to do two things. First, how did Midnight get us here? What actually happened in this expansion to make this stuff make sense? And then second, what it means for the future. Because, believe me, Blizzard aren't just trying to solve Shadowlands lore here, they're basically using it to build one of the greatest conflicts that Warcraft has ever seen. Greatest in scale for Warcraft. Whether you think it's great or not, well, that's up to you. Let's dive into how all this happened. So, the Voidspire devoured the last of the Vanguard of the Light, that was our previous raid, and with no option left but to listen to Arator, Lor'themar agreed that it was now time to call for outside help. And no, not from the Horde. Who knows what they're up to these days? But from a coalition Arator's been building since the War Within's epilogue. And that means it's time to reunite the elves. First, he goes to Bellular. Chandris is on board and rallies the Sentinels, but Maiev is there to remind us that this is not the first time the Sunwell has threatened the world. That, in reality, elves, all elves, have this insane need for a font of power, and it keeps on ending in disaster. The main example being the Well of Eternity, which not only shattered the elves into their many different tribes, but also, well, sort of nearly destroyed the entire planet. Oops. Now on the political side, even putting aside how the Blood Elves are in the Horde and that it was Sylvanas who burnt down Teldrassil, the Night Elves do technically owe Silvermoon one, and that's because Lor'themar personally defended Emirdrassil. So Chandris has no conditions on aid, though she does ask that after all is said and done, can we not turn on the Sunwell again? Because it does seem to be a little bit risky. Well, that's a big ask for people who are, well, kind of addicted to their magical well of infinite power. Lor'themar says he'll think about it. Meanwhile, back in Silvermoon, the Void Elves have already been defending the Sunwell, and the Silver Covenant are loitering about at the edge of the zone, unsure if they're really allowed to return home. And there's honestly so much to say about this, but the High Elves returning to Silvermoon is kind of a huge moment for the game's lore. And to help them do that, we picked up the Crown and Law Book of Anasternian. That's fairly huge. And the High Elves did acknowledge the brutality of the Purge of Dalaran, which really was quite something. So they showed some humility, and they returned home for the first time since the Third War. And with that being done and the tribes reunited, it was time to get marching. If you feel like you're missing bits of the story, this whole segment is for you, so let me go through how all of this went down and a bunch of the stuff that you've probably missed. So, the Sunwell was threatened, and the Light responded. The Light's vanguard appeared with the promise of being a hammer of justice ready to smite the Void, but it quickly became clear that the vanguard was kind of burning in the fires of their own power, their own faith, their own zeal. Turalyon accidentally wounds Arator, their commanders end up becoming paranoid lunatics, and when we finally assaulted what we thought was Xal'atath's fortress, the Voidspire, they became light-blinded, and we had to put a few of them down. So the Light's vanguard were quite a failure, and the Voidspire they attacked turned out to be a reality drilling machine designed to funnel the power of the Void into the Sunwell. This did work, and we're now left with no option but this desperate march on the Isle of Quel'danas. It was the Elves who saved the day here, a coalition of Void, Blood, High, and Night Elves, and it's an arc that kicked off in the War Within's epilogue. It was called The Warning, and in it, Verisa Windrunner experiences the same sort of radiant world soul visions that Anduin and Thrall experienced at the beginning of The War Within. We saw an example of those in the big World Soul Saga cinematic that Blizzard did. But this time, she received visions of Silvermoon being attacked by the Void, and wielders of the light like Lothraxion actually burning in light-blinded fire. Spooky stuff. We were there for this, along with Arator, who had been following Verisa, who is of course his aunt. We ventured about Khazalgar, and as it turned out, being closer to the Coreway, and thus the World Soul, is what triggered that vision, and that's basically what led to us discovering that Silvermoon was Xal'atath's next target. That's absolutely huge. Basically, Azeroth gave us a little bit of a nudge. So, Arator, being the good old beacon of peace and unity and lovely things that he is, decided that what he needed to do was bring the Windrunner sisters back together. Because if the last decade has taught us anything, it is that this is World of Windrunners. So, Verisa was on board with this plan. She goes to rally the High Elves of the Silver Covenant, but some of the other groups were a bit of a harder sell. We went to Koresh with Arator to get Illyria to come and help, but she was too busy hunting Xal'atath, and that of course led to her fate at the Voidspire. But then we went after Sylvanas, and that is where the story, well, some would say gets off the rails. I think it's actually kind of interesting. And to understand why, we actually need to rewind. We need to rewind and go way back. Sylvanas Windrunner died defending Silvermoon, but Arthas did not give her the peace of a true death. She became the Banshee Queen of the Forsaken, who outlived the Scourge and transformed into the thing that she once fought, a murderous dictator. On the surface, we just thought she was a brutal but pragmatic sort of character. We may completely disagree with her means, but you could maybe see she was trying to fight for her people and maybe for herself. But in reality, it turned out that she was working for a sort of omnipotent god of the afterlife. And here's how that went down. Whenever Arthas died, Sylvanas tossed herself from the top of Icecrown Citadel. Basically, vengeance was got. What else does she have to live for? That's it. Just give me the peace of death. She does not get the peace of death. Instead, she wakes up in the Maw. And she realizes, oh dear, it will be eternal torture for here on out. That's fairly grim, but the good news for Sylvanas is that is when some Valkyr appeared, and with the sacrifice of one of those Valkyr, she was able to come back to Azeroth. But she wasn't the same. She was existentially traumatized, and she very much had a mission. It's a little unclear at what stage her mission became ironclad, but the shortest way of putting it is this. The afterlife is a scam, and I'm going to destroy it. And that's ultimately why she ends up joining with the Jailer, Zovaal, that god of death, and it's why she did all of those Battle for Azeroth things, pumping as many mortal souls into the Maw as possible. You see, if the afterlife is just this big power plant for souls, then they can shove a bunch of souls into the power plant and then swipe all of the energy, which basically is the whole plan. She does that by becoming War Chief and throwing Azeroth into the most pointless war the planet had probably ever seen. That was Battle for Azeroth. Shortly after, she broke the Helm of Domination and launched us into the Shadowlands. We face-planted our way through 3 increasingly strange raid tiers, and it was at the end of Shadowlands' second raid that she took a bit of a shot at the Jailer and very much found out that she was not his equal partner in crime. Of course, we end up defeating the Jailer, but we're left with a problem. What do we do with Sylvanas? And as it turns out, she goes to the Maw on a long quest for redemption, trying to right her wrongs one soul at a time. Years go by. Years. We're off doing other things. But then one day, the Void attacks the Maw. A portal opens, and Arator, her nephew, steps through this portal and tells her the Sunwell is threatened and that Silvermoon needs its Ranger General back. Sylvanas, having at least some self-awareness, tells Arator that Azeroth is really not ready for her return. But even more importantly, since her time in the Maw, she has discovered the Shadowlands, the whole construct of death, is a scam, deeper than she had ever imagined. She says it is too familiar, it is too ordered. And of course in Warcraft lore, ordered means built by the Titans. And you know what? That alone would be some pretty cool world building. But here it is a bit more than that. It is a hint to the A-plot that will dominate the rest of Midnight's story. And now we cut back to Quel'danas. Because not only did Sylvanas save the day, she also gave us a warning. She tells us that her true work, her penance, has only just begun, and that penance no longer means just righting the wrongs of her time as War Chief, but it also now means investigating and uncovering whatever the hell is actually going on in the Maw, in the Shadowlands, basically getting to the bottom of what she saw whenever she tossed herself off Icecrown Citadel all those years ago at the end of Wrath of the Lich King. So, she tells us the Shadowlands are not all what they seem and that she cannot rest until she uncovers the truth. So what the hell is going on? I've seen a lot of people look at this and think, ah, damn, cool moment, look at Sylvanas doing her aura farming. But I've also seen a lot of, what is all this vague posting about? Well, there's a lot of dots to connect, but when you do, it's fairly straightforward. So straightforward that we're literally told what's going to happen next. We march in Quel'danas, we slay Bellular, child of Alar, and then it is down to the Sunwell, where once again we face off against a Void-turned-Naru, in this case, Lura. And as far as the characters in our story are concerned, Lura is basically the promised apocalypse of the Void. Everything seems lost, but then Sylvanas appears. and Xal'atath backs off. So, you may be wondering then, what did Xal'atath get out of doing any of this stuff? And why is she just floating about the place, dangling her feet at people, vague posting, and aura farming? The good news is, I can help answer those questions, so let me lay it out. Xal'atath corrupted the Sunwell, we failed to kill her, and that means that she is on to the next step of her plan. Sylvanas told us that the Shadowlands is a big old conspiracy, and that the whole thing is likely built by the Titans. Of course, we can put that together given her past dialogue in patch 11.2.7. And both of these storylines converge on one promise that we got in the middle of Dragonflight.
With this, the Harbinger will pry it from their grasp. And when the Titans come to reclaim their prize, I will be waiting.
Yeah, we were literally told by one of Xal'atath's mates that when the, quote, Harbinger tears the world soul from the Titans' grasp, that the Titans will return to claim their prize. Their prize is Azeroth, the Prime World, the key to their grand conspiracy to control reality, or, do whatever it is they want to do. We haven't exactly asked them yet. Of course, we know the Titans are going to return in The Last Titan, the next expansion set in Northrend. So it's Sylvanas' appearance at the Sunwell that brings these storylines together. On the one hand, Xal'atath gets what she wants. She gets access to the World Soul. You may be wondering how, and I guess the answer is through the machinery of death. The War of Men set up the Manifold, the whole big web of machinery that the Titans use to control Azeroth. At its center is the World Core, and from lore drops such as this, which is a World Core fragment, we know that the World Core is connected to the ley lines. And if you were a good World of Warcraft player and played through the campaign with the audio turned on, you'd have heard a few characters mentioning ley lines. Now, we also know that the Sunwell is on a particularly powerful nexus of ley lines, and that means it's literally hotwired into the Titan's Manifold, which is that whole network of machines and stuff that are also quite near a bunch of the ley lines. What Xal'atath just got, basically, is a way into that system. So while my first reaction was, interesting, Xal'atath went into the floor. Yeah, she went into the floor, but more specifically, ley lines underneath the floor. And that means that void corruption is now coursing its way around the world. And that means that she can do what Iridikron promised she would do. Tear Azeroth from the Titans' grasp by basically messing up their plans, messing up their Manifold and all their machines, all those machines that we've been seeing literally since vanilla, and getting what she wants, Azeroth. So that is what we saw in the March on Quel'danas. Xal'atath does get one step closer to her goal, which is tearing the World Soul from the Titan's grasp. Presumably, she'll want to devour it, and in doing so, she'll basically secure her survival forever, because she will have just kinda consumed reality in a way. So with that in mind, the narrative direction of WoW's A-plot should make a decent bit more sense to you. We can really see where it's all going. We're going to get Iridikron, Xal'atath, Titans, real big-scale stuff. And I'd say that's mostly going to be in the next expansion. You might be wondering then, what about the rest of this expansion? Well, I'd say there's still quite a lot to explore. Illyria and Turalyon are, in the Darkwell, I guess. We're probably going to work something out with them. And we were also told that this expansion would be the ultimate clash between light and void. We've seen spooky light stuff. We've dealt with the void. And that probably means that some of our future patches are going to be dealing with the light. I, for one, hope that means lots of Draenei. So, I hope this has tied things together for you, and if you want to watch something next, it's actually not one of the videos that I published within the last few weeks. No, it is the 11.2.7 campaign. You've almost certainly missed it. It was the epilogue at the end of The War Within. But seriously, it does so much work setting all this up, and if you want to experience it, watch this video next.